Author of The Real Hank Aaron, an intimate look at the life and legacy of the home run king. And you are watching and listening to Rolling Out.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Malik Brown, here for Rolling Out. Meet the author. And today I have the pleasure to speak with Mr. Terence Moore. He is the author of The Real Hank Aaron, an intimate look at the life and legacy of the home run king. Mr. Terence, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Doing good, doing good. Glad to be speaking with you about this amazing book that was just released, a couple weeks ago, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's hot, as they say, hot off the presses.
Right. So, everybody knows Terence. Journalist, columnist. You do it all, and you decided to make this book, centered around Hank Aaron, who is, you say, one of your closest friends. So, why did you want to make this book, centered around Hank Aaron?
Yeah, I would say there's like three big buckets of why I did this. And one is, if you think you knew or know Hank Aaron, you don't. I was closer to Hank than anybody on the face of the earth who was a reporter. We had a 40-year relationship, and that turned into a friendship relationship, I say, from a reporter subject point of view, but it kind of evolved further than that. And 95% of the stuff in this book has never, ever been said before about Hank or by Hank. And there's been a slew, Malik, a slew of Hank Aaron books out there, a slew of Hank Aaron documentaries. And the thing that makes this interesting, this was started to go into the works about 6 months before Hank's death. And I asked Hank just that. I said, Hank, again, all the stuff that's been out there about you, no one really knows you, and they don't know what I have. And I said, I think we ought to do something about this. And he agreed. So this is the work of that, came out of that partly. The other big thing to note of this book, it's also about the symmetry between Jackie Robinson, Hank's idol, Hank Aaron, and myself as a trailblazing Black sports journalist, and being the first Black columnist in the history of the Deep South. In other words, to put it bluntly, I was the first Black person allowed to give his opinion as a sports writer, and it was not a pretty sight. And so it talks about the relationship between Hank and I that helped me through that 25-year period inside and outside the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, dealing with deep racism. And then I would say the third bucket involves this poster back here, this poster of Hank Aaron. I bought this poster of Hank Aaron when I was 12 years old back in 1968. So that's why I got gray hair, by the way. And so I went from the 12-year-old who used his model car money to purchase this poster of Hank Aaron in 1968 to being an honorary pallbearer at his funeral in January of 2021, I should say. I don't think many people can say that. And I think of, people talk about at funerals a lot of times, they always say on the tombstone, you have the birth date and you have the death date. Then you have the hyphen in between that represents the totality of your life. That's where I look at this book, okay? That hyphen in this book spans the time, actually slightly before I bought this Hank Aaron poster to right up to his death in January of 2021.
And just hearing those 3 points, I mean, it sounds like, you guys had some things in common that, kind of, brought you guys as a friendship more than just, journalist and athlete. And, what do you think are some of the things, besides maybe, you talked about the racism that you experienced when you were named as the first Black journalist in the South. And of course, Hank Aaron had to go through racism as well. Do you think that was kind of, connected you guys, or what really connected you guys throughout your time together?
Well, I mean, I think you hit upon it, Malik. And one of the things that I am very proud of in this book, and to paraphrase this old line that Jim Morris said, Jim Morris Sr., he was interviewed one time, and the people remember Jim Mora as the guy who said, playoffs, playoffs? But he also was a guy, when somebody asked him a question, he said, you think you know, but you don't know. You will never know. And that's one thing about this book. I bring out a lot of things that are deeper than deep. And one of which I go in a deep dive on this racism thing. And I use Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, and myself as an example of the way racism as a whole is, as opposed to what people think it is. Now, what people think it is, they think it's confined to that time period when you had fire hoses and attack dogs and burning crosses. Well, yeah, that still was around and is around even to this day. But racism, the kind that is more prevalent, and certainly in the latter 20th century and the 21st century, is what I would call hidden racism. And it's a hidden racism of mind games. And so we talk an awful lot about mind games in here. And that's something that Hank and I discussed an awful lot, comparing notes with the mind games he was encountering and the mind games I was encountering. And Malik, one of the things I need to point out, that I do point out in this book, when people think of Hank Aaron, they want to confine his issues with racism with that period in the early 70s when he was chasing Babe Ruth's record. You know, when he was getting the death threats and the threatening letters and those type of things, and the images of Hank Aaron kept his head down, and by golly, he still hit home runs. Well, I want to tell you something. There was a period that was longer and much worse than that, and that was a period for the rest of his life. He encountered racism for the rest of his life, and it started taking the form that I just told you about, the mind games, and it lasted throughout his career as a Braves executive, which was longer than his Major League Baseball career. 23 years Major League Baseball, 45 years as Braves executive. He was taken in fire, racism-wise, inside and outside the Braves front office, which has never been mentioned before, until I mentioned this in this book and the different forms of it.
Wow. So you say he's been dealing with it, basically even after his career, which is crazy. And I mean, and of course, you talk about how, you dealt with it as well. How did it kind of affect you as your time as a journalist?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I talk about this in the book. What really helped me, and I'm a Christian, and as a Christian, I always believe there's no such thing as coincidence. And one of the things you'll see when you read this book, there's this thread that was going through my life that I didn't realize, even going back to the first time I can remember Hank Aaron. I knew Hank Aaron before I knew Hank Aaron. As a 10-year-old in South Bend, Indiana, watching the Atlanta Braves go to Wrigley Field to play Chicago. Because in South Bend, Indiana, the Cubs were our team. We watched them on television all the time. And from that time through the buying of the poster at 12 years old, all the way through, there were all these moments where it was like I was built and meant to be what I call in the book, the Hank Aaron Whisperer. And I mentioned that at this point, giving you a question, because one of the things that was very pronounced, and I knew it at the time somewhat, but I really know it now looking back. I grew up in the household of Jackie Robinsons. And growing up in the household of Jackie Robinsons was just like growing up in the household of Hank Aaron's, because Hank Aaron was Jackie Robinson. My father was the first AT&T supervisor ever, okay? And my mom was the first person to work for the savings and loans company called the Associates, was based in South Bend, Indiana. My brother Daryl was the first Black baseball player in the history of University of Wisconsin. And my dad being AT&T supervisor, used to get transferred around the Midwest. So I was the first in just everything you can possibly name. I was the first Black on my baseball team, first Black on the football team, first Black for my high school newspaper, first Black editor of high school newspaper, first Black for the Miami of Ohio University newspaper, which is the oldest college newspaper west of the Alleghenies, first reporter ever for that paper, first editor of any kind for that paper, then first Black writer in history of the Cincinnati Enquirer for sports, first Black sports writer in history of the San Francisco Examiner, first Black person that ever covered a National Football League team on a regular basis for a major metropolitan newspaper. I can go on and on and on. And I mentioned that, Malik, because when I started connecting the dots, going back to that 10-year-old to 12-year-old to high school to college and what have you, I was meant to become Hank Aaron's closest person from a reporter standpoint, because Hank sensed the truth, and that is, I understood him. I understood what he was going through, because I was going through similar things throughout my life. I was watching my parents go through similar things and other relatives, and it just made for a perfect match.
Definitely, and I know you definitely talk about that in the book. And going back to just Hank Aaron. You talk about Jackie Robinson as well. What did those two guys do for the game of baseball to where we are today? What did they do for the game of baseball?
I like that question, because here's the thing. As huge as Jackie Robinson was as a player, April 15th, 1947, breaking the color barrier, as huge as Hank Aaron was on April 8th, 1974, breaking Babe Ruth home run record, the great white hope. And I'm going to stand on that for just a second, because, they say, remember where I'm at in case I lose my place. Think about this. Arguably, professional baseball has been played since 1869. The two biggest moments in the history of Major League Baseball, think about it, were by Black men. April 15th, 1947, that color barrier being broken, and then at April 8th, 1974, when a Black man breaks the record of the Great White Hope. Okay, so you have all of this going on there. But anyway, what I was getting to is, both of those guys, Hank and Jackie, were beyond baseball. Baseball was just like just a little bit. It was beyond that. Jackie Robinson played barely a decade with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Then he finishes his career in 1956. But the rest of his life, till he died in 1972, he was what I call the forgotten civil rights leader. And he's right up there with Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, Rosa Parks, all those guys. Matter of fact, Jackie Robinson refused to sit in the back of a bus in the Army 10 years before Rosa Parks. Okay, he was that guy. And Hank Aaron, contrary to his image of being this docile guy, just hit home runs. Well, I know as Hank Aaron whisperer, when he wanted something out there, he would call me, okay, which was quite often. And so I wrote an awful lot about Hank Aaron blasting Major League Baseball for being racist. And it is racist, by the way, blasting society for its various ills and what have you. And when he was blasting baseball and society, he was getting blasted, okay, which is another part of the story. Jackie Robinson, when Jackie Robinson finished his playing career and he was out there marching with Dr. King, people forget about that, but he was, okay, and being outspoken, people hated Jackie Robinson for that. Why doesn't he keep his mouth shut? Okay, that sort of thing, okay? And it wasn't until, and there's another parallel between those two, which I talk about in the book, it wasn't until Jackie, and when I'm gonna do Jackie and Hank at the same time, it wasn't until Hank, near the end of their lives, became safe in the minds of people, mainly white people, but certainly some Black people. That's when they became beloved again, because in the minds of those people, they were harmless at that point. I call it the Muhammad Ali thing. I'm old enough to remember the 60s when people hated Muhammad Ali, couldn't stand them. I mean, black and white. And so during the last stretch of Muhammad Ali's life, I was getting quite ill hearing all these people and all these press reports. Oh, isn't Muhammad Ali a great guy? He stood by his convictions. Shortly afterwards, oh, wait a minute. Well, that's because he was considered harmless by these people. Soon as you're a Black person who is outspoken, as they like to call us, once you're considered harmless, all of a sudden you're a great guy. Happened to Muhammad Ali, happened to Jackie Robinson, happened to Hank Aaron. And this goes back to one of the questions you asked earlier. This is another reason why I decided to do this book. I didn't want people to get away with that. Okay, stick to, be true to who you are. You're the same people that was ripping Hank Aaron for not sticking in his place. Can he just be satisfied being a home run king and just keep his mouth shut? Those same people that were just ripping him for 30, 40 years after his Major League Baseball career are the ones near the end of his career, when he was walking with a cane or and a wheelchair and a cart, and smiling and throwing out the ceremonial for baseballs, like, oh, what a great guy this guy is. No, you can't have it both ways.
And you being a journalist, columnist around that time, and you actually having to talk about these type of things? Did you feel any type of pressure? Did you feel like you didn't want to say certain things? Like, how was it for you, writing about these things when you talk about the Muhammad Ali's and the Jackies and the Hank Aaron's and what they wanted to say? How did that come out for you?
Well, see, you're becoming a very good spokesperson for my book, because this ties right into my book. And because I was the person who was willing to say everything I just said right here, I was considered the controversial bad guy. I was a problem. I was it was like white folks who are offended by this. Oh, I'm not the racist. You're the racist for bringing this up. Okay. It became, again, these mind games. And you got to remember, when I came to Atlanta in 1985, again, there had never been a Black person, sports or otherwise, on a consistent basis who had been allowed to give his opinion in the media. And one of the things I've always been, even going back to high school in the 70s, I've always been a direct opinion giver. So I was the devil here, because I came hard, telling hard truth, and people could not stand it. And whether I'm talking to Hank Aaron and giving his views, or whether I'm giving my views on what's going on in baseball or it's a society or in sports, then it was I was considered radical. One of the examples I give in the book, back in I think it was 1988, a guy named Rodney Peete, who was a quarterback for the Southern Cal, set all these records for Southern Cal, and did all these great things, and finished like either 2 or 3 in the Heisman Trophy balloting. Wasn't picked until like the 6th round. Okay, I was way ahead of the curve, and I started ripping the NFL for being racist against Black quarterbacks, because they were, and they still are to a certain extent, except in certain situations, and gave all the facts and what have you. And the Atlanta Journal-Constitution killed the column. And when I asked for a reason, they said, well, because it didn't make any sense. And then one of the editors said, well, everybody knows that Rodney Peete couldn't play. Spoiler alert, Rodney Peete ended up playing 15 years in the National Football League. Point of the matter is, these are the type of truths I used to talk about and write about, and they didn't want to hear that. Because, again, it was very much like what Jackie was going through or went through, or Hank went through. And what you have to do is you have to stick to being a person of conviction, no matter what the noise is around you.
Look, I don't want to give away too many spoilers of the book, because I'm asking you questions that have spoiled the book. So I really want to ask you, and I was just having this conversation with I had this conversation with Rashad on our sports show, and we were talking about the Tim Anderson situation with him and Josh Donaldson, and just certain things like that. And we were talking about Michael Harris, of course, just got caught up onto the Braves. In your opinion, do you still feel like Black kids, Black people, love the game of baseball? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, once again, you're steering me back to the book, because when people are going to be, I should say, surprised when they read what I have to say about what you just said. Because one of the reasons that Hank and I became very close goes back to the first time we ever met. And this was back in the spring of 1982, when I was working for the San Francisco Examiner, and a very enlightened paper. It was just like night and day. The San Francisco Examiner, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And they let me work for a month on a series on what was going on with Blacks in Major League Baseball. And I'll give you a short version of this, because there's a long version. But I found out from talking to people, Black and white, players, executives, scouts, high school level, college level, minor league levels, right on down the line, that baseball had a quota system and was purposely phasing African Americans out of the game. I was told also in 1982 that this was going to result in the fact of baseball at the time that was 19% Black. Remember now, in 82, I was told this, they were saying that at this rate, by the turn of the 21st century, is going to be below 10% and less. What is it right now in 2022? 7%. This was done on purpose. I even have a smoking gun to prove that, which you can read about in the book. And Hank and I became very close. That was the first time I talked to Hank, and Hank was among those who said point blank that baseball was purposely doing this. I had other prominent players saying the same thing, saying that this started back in the 60s. Hank believed until the day that he died that Major League Baseball had a vendetta against black players. And just to give you the brief reason, people say, well, why is that so? Well, it's because, and again, I'm just telling you how baseball thought back then, and perhaps even thinks back right about now. The powers that be thought baseball was becoming too black. That's essentially it. And you start looking at the stars of the 60s. Who do you think of? Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, as opposed to Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, and Ty Cobb. They were yesterday's heroes. So the fix, so to speak, was basically in that regards.
So how do you think that we can switch that narrative, or do you think there's any fixing? How can we get more black people involved in baseball?
Well, see, and I'm telling you, this goes beyond baseball. One of the things I always tell people, among other things, I'm a journalism professor at Miami, Ohio. And one of my favorite lines that I'm sure my students get tired of me saying, or the mentees that I have that I tell this to the mentees, including yourself, is that everything's the same. Everything's the same. You know, if you look at some aspect of whatever it is in life, you can see kernels of it spreading elsewhere. So it's not just baseball. It's not just baseball. And to answer your question, is going to be, that's just like asking, how are we going to end racism in society? What's the answer to that? Okay, it's not good. I mean, because people have this in them that it's a human nature, unfortunately. We could say pie in the sky, you know, geez, well, maybe one day dogs and cats can live and lie down together and whatever. Well, I guess. But all I know is that it's going to be very difficult. And I'll just give you this quick example. Just a few weeks ago here in Atlanta, Georgia, switching sports, National Football League had this big meeting of owners, okay? And they're all meeting, supposedly, they try to figure out, oh, gee whiz, how can we get more blacks in the game, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Well, you know how you get more black head coaches in the National Football League? Hire them. It's not this big secret, but they put on this dog and pony show, like, oh, geez, we're going to bring in all these black guys in here, and so that they could get the chance, so we get a chance to know them, they get a chance to know us, so that next time there's a hiring that we know them. That's not it. And the one classic example of that, I know it's football, but again, it's all the same thing. The keynote speaker was the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, because they had the event right here, Arthur Blank. Okay, Arthur Blank gave this big speech about, oh, we got to be more diverse. Well, wait a minute, Arthur Blank? Well, this is the same Arthur Blank that has been on the NFL diversity committee since 2002 when it began. Yeah, that Arthur Blank. Okay, that same Arthur Blank that was talking about, well, we need to get more diverse, blah, blah, blah. Since he's been on the diversity committee since its inception in 2002, has hired not one, not two, to steal a line from LeBron James, not three, not four, 5 head coaches since 2002 when he's been on the diversity committee, and altogether now, none of them have been black. Okay, that's what I'm talking about that we're dealing with here. I mean, it's like, if it's not coming from the heart and the soul, that's where it comes from. There's no magic potion out there. You got to want it.
You're speaking a lot of gems right now, Terrence. You're speaking a lot of truth right now. We're almost short on time, so wrapping it up. I mean, you've really touched on a lot of things. You really touched on race in baseball, and race in just not in baseball, but in these other sports as well, and outside of sports. You talked about Hank Aaron's legacy and Jackie Robinson and of those people. But going back to the book, to just wrap it all up, you know, for somebody that just got this book, hasn't opened up a page yet, what's the one thing that you would tell them that you want them to get out of this book? What do you want these people that read this book to get out of this at the end of the day?
All right. Well, I think one of the things I want them to get out of this book is to find out the essence of what the title says and find it in the book. And the essence of the title is the real Hank Aaron, as opposed to the fake Hank Aaron. You can also look at that as the real Black America, the real baseball. This book deals with what is real, not with the fantasy of it. And I come hard with what's real.
Thank you so much, Mr. Terence, for allowing us to speak about this amazing book. I'm reading it, and I'm diving into it. But thank you so much for coming on, speak with us. Before you go, let the people know where they can find the book. Where they can find you on social media, all the work that you do. Still, let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, I mean, you get it on Barnes and Noble or Amazon.com. You can find it that way. And I personally, I'm how much time you got? I'm a national sports columnist for Forbes.com. I also run a YouTube channel that also Malik Brown is a part of, called Atlanta Sports Unlimited. And every Sunday night, I'm the star of a show called Atlanta, it's called Sports Zone Sunday on WSB Channel 2 here in Atlanta, Georgia. Comes on at 11:30 every Sunday night. Also a visiting professor of journalism at Miami of Ohio University, where I went to school. What else I do? Whatever else I do is irrelevant because that's enough.
Look, everybody, if you don't know now, Terence wears a lot of hats. So, so we appreciate everything that he does. I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you for everything, and thank you for making this amazing book. I hope everybody goes out and reads it. I know you have shared a lot of amazing things from people that have read the book, and I know it's great. It's great. So thank you, Terence, for coming on again, speaking with us. This is Rolling Out, Meet the Author with Malik Brown, my special guest, Mr. Terence Moore, and we are out.